Have you ever wondered how African nations, shackled in colonial chains for centuries, broke free to shape their own destinies? This question, compelling and intriguing, is the genesis of our exploration today. We delve into the era of African independence movements, a period marked by courage, struggle, and a fervent desire for self-determination. For centuries, Africa was a mosaic of cultures and kingdoms, its history rich and diverse. But with the onset of the late 19th century, the continent was carved up by European powers in a period known as the Scramble for Africa. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, and Italy, they all staked their claim, forever altering the course of African history. But as the 20th century dawned, the seeds of change were sown. The winds of World War II swept over the continent, and in its aftermath, the world was a different place. The war had exposed the contradictions of colonial rule. It had shown that the so-called civilized nations could be as brutal and destructive as those they deemed primitive. This realization sparked the flame of nationalism in the hearts of African people. The rise of nationalism was not a sudden burst, but rather a gradual awakening. People began to question the legitimacy of colonial rule, to challenge the status quo. They saw the need for political autonomy, for economic independence, for cultural revival. They saw the need to reclaim their land, their resources, their identities. And so the stage was set for the African independence movements. From the bustling streets of Accra to the windswept plains of Algiers, from the crowded townships of Johannesburg to the verdant hills of Nairobi, the call for freedom echoed. It was a call that transcended ethnic and linguistic barriers, a call that united people in a common cause. It was a call that would forever change the face of Africa. But behind this broad picture, there are untold stories waiting to be explored. Stories of heroism and sacrifice, of resilience and determination. Stories that are etched in the annals of time yet remain largely untold. And it is these stories that we will delve into in our journey ahead. Our journey begins in the early 20th century, a time when the seeds of resistance were sown. As the winds of the new century blew across the African continent, a spirit of defiance began to stir. The shackles of colonial rule, long accepted as a harsh reality, were now being challenged. This era marked the birth of organized resistance movements against the encroachment of foreign powers. In the southernmost tip of Africa, in 1912, the African National Congress was born. Initially named the South African Native National Congress, it was a beacon of hope for the oppressed, a voice for the voiceless. The ANC, as it came to be known, played an instrumental role in the anti-apartheid struggle, advocating for equal rights and freedom for all South Africans. Its influence reached far beyond the borders of South Africa, inspiring liberation movements across the continent. Now, let's journey westward to Nigeria, where in 1929, a remarkable event unfolded. This was the Aba Women's Riot, an uprising that is considered one of the most significant instances of organized resistance in the history of Nigeria. Thousands of Igbo women rose in protest against oppressive colonial policies, displaying an unprecedented level of unity, courage, and resilience. This riot was not just a challenge to the colonial rule, but also a testament to the power of women in the fight for freedom. These women, these warriors, sent a clear message. They may have been marginalized, but they were not powerless. Their actions served as a powerful symbol of resistance, and their spirit resonates in the ongoing fight for equality and justice in Africa and beyond. These early movements, the ANC, the Aba Women's Riot, were the catalysts for a wave of resistance that swept across the continent. They were the spark that ignited the flame of liberation, setting the stage for a series of independence movements that would forever change the face of Africa. These early movements set the stage for a changing Africa, an Africa yearning for freedom. As we move into the mid-20th century, the winds of change began to blow across the African continent. A new dawn was breaking, carrying with it a wave of independence movements that swept through the 50s and 60s. These were times of struggle and upheaval, of resilience and determination, but above all, these were times of change. In the heart of East Africa, the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya was a beacon of this change. Ordinary people rose against the British colonial rule, their voices echoing through the highlands and into the hearts of their fellow countrymen. They fought not just for their land, but for their identity, their culture, their heritage. Their battle cry was freedom, and they would not be silenced. Meanwhile, in the northern reaches of the continent, the Algerian War of Independence raged on, a fierce and bloody struggle against French rule, it was a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Algerian people. Their fight was not just against an oppressive regime, but against decades of cultural erosion and systemic inequality. The Algerians sought to reclaim their homeland and their dignity, to write their own history in their own words. And then there were the leaders, those influential figures who steered the course of these movements. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, a visionary and a philosopher, was one such leader. He believed in the power of unity, in the strength of a united Africa. His words and ideas inspired many, sparking a flame of hope in the hearts of millions. And who could forget Patrice Lumumba of the Congo? A charismatic and passionate leader, he fought tirelessly for his people's independence. His relentless pursuit of justice and equality resonated with many, and his legacy continues to inspire future generations. Each of these movements, each of these leaders, played a pivotal role in shaping the Africa we know today. They were the winds of change, the forces that challenged the status quo, that dared to dream of a better future. These movements shook the very foundations of colonial rule, heralding an era of transformation. The struggle for independence, however, did not end with the lowering of colonial flags. It persisted, morphing into a different kind of battle, one that was waged within the borders of these newly formed nations. The echoes of freedom cries gave way to the harsh realities of post-colonial governance, and the African continent found itself grappling with challenges that were as daunting as they were diverse. Many African nations, fresh from the yoke of colonial rule, plunged into civil wars. These internal conflicts were often fueled by the ethnic and regional tensions that had been suppressed or exacerbated under colonial rule. From the Biafran War in Nigeria to the protracted civil war in Angola, these conflicts tore at the fabric of nationhood, leaving deep scars that continue to shape these countries today. Alongside these wars, military coups became a common feature on the African political landscape. These abrupt changes in government, often violent and always disruptive, were indicative of the power struggles that ensued in the vacuum left by departing colonial powers. From Ghana to Sudan, these coups often led to dictatorships that stifled democratic development and further entrenched socio-political divides. The economic crises that followed were another dimension of the struggle. Many African countries grappled with the task of restructuring their economies, which had been skewed towards the interests of the colonial powers. The process was fraught with challenges, from over-reliance on single commodity exports to the burden of foreign debt, leading to economic instability and widespread poverty. Yet, even as these struggles raged on, the fight against apartheid in South Africa continued unabated. This was a struggle that transcended national borders, galvanizing the entire continent and indeed the world. It was a stark reminder that the fight for freedom, for equality, and for self-determination was far from over. Independence was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards self-determination. The struggle for African independence did not end with the hoisting of national flags. Rather, it merely shifted, transforming into a struggle for nation-building, for reconciliation, and for the realization of the ideals that had fueled the fight for freedom. As we reflect on these untold stories, we are reminded of the power of resistance and the spirit of resilience. The African independence movements were not merely historical events, but a testament to the unyielding spirit of humanity in its quest for freedom and dignity. Let's journey back to the dawn of the question, when the seeds of resistance were first sown. The birth of resistance was not a singular event, but a series of interconnected moments that sparked a burning desire for independence. This desire was not quenched easily. It was a flame that was fueled by the winds of change, a wind that blew across the continent, fanning the embers of rebellion into a raging fire. The struggle was not easy. It was marked by sacrifice, courage, and an unflinching determination. But it was also marked by a sense of unity and solidarity. The struggle was not just about independence, but about reclaiming identity, restoring dignity, and rewriting history from the perspective of the oppressed. So, what lessons can we draw from these movements? First and foremost, the importance of unity in the face of adversity. The independence movements were successful because they were able to unite diverse groups of people around a common cause. They were able to channel their collective energy towards a shared vision of freedom and dignity. Secondly, the power of resilience. The journey towards independence was not a smooth one. It was filled with obstacles and challenges. But the spirit of resilience, the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, was a key factor in their success. Finally, the relevance of these movements to contemporary struggles for justice and equality cannot be overstated. In a world where injustices still persist, these stories serve as a reminder of the power of resistance and the possibility of change. The stories of the African independence movements are not just about the past, they are about the present and the future, they are about the unending quest for freedom and dignity.